I need freedom. That was all Julian wrote on a yellow sticky note, stuck to my monitor right next to the code I had stayed up all night finishing. 20 years, and my value was reduced to a 3-inch piece of paper. He went to find freedom with some spiritual influencer named Sky. They did not know that while they were sinking souls, I was sinking servers. 6 months later, when Julian returned, he learned that freedom really means losing absolutely everything. My name is Eliza Vance. I am, or perhaps was, 48 years old when my world officially ended. Or maybe, when it began. The quartz countertops of our Cherry Creek kitchen were cold, reflecting the sterile, minimalist aesthetic Julian insisted upon. It was just after 6 a.m. I was on my second cup of black coffee, the steam rising against the brushed steel of the espresso machine. My mind was focused on the quarterly shareholder meeting, specifically the data integrity slides for Section 4 of the presentation. That was when I saw it. Not a text, not an email, but a bright yellow sticky note slapped carelessly onto the bezel of my laptop. I need freedom. 4 words. That was the entirety of the message from Julian, my husband of 20 years. Julian, the man who was 50 years old but still cultivated the restless energy of a college sophomore. He was the charismatic face of Synapse Partners, the man who charmed venture capitalists while I, the chief creative officer and the actual architect of our technology, wrote the code that made their investments worthwhile. The note was stuck right next to the very algorithms I had been debugging all night. I did not cry. The expectation of tears felt absurd, a biological response I had no time for. I looked at his handwriting, a lazy, looping cursive that always looked better on a cocktail napkin than a legal document. I felt a surge, not of grief, but of profound clinical disgust. It was not the abandonment that offended me. It was the sheer, pathetic cowardice to detonate 2 decades of partnership with an office supply. My hand was steady as I picked up my phone. I angled it to catch the light, ensuring the ink was legible against the yellow. Click. The image was sharp. I opened my encrypted drive, bypassed the shared family folders, and went to a vault Julian did not know existed. I created a new directory. I named it Evidence, Phase 1. I saved the photograph. I peeled the note off the screen and dropped it onto the counter as if it were contaminated. I tried his phone. Straight to voicemail. The device was off. Of course it was. I pulled up our joint personal account. Julian handled the household finances, which meant I rarely looked at it. The balance, which should have been well into 6 figures, was now $312, nearly empty. He had been siphoning it. I switched to the security feed. The minimalist house had maximalist surveillance, another of Julian's expensive tastes. I scrubbed back through the timeline. There, 3:17 a.m. Julian, dressed in dark clothes, pulling 2 large Rimowa suitcases, my suitcases. I noted with a separate, colder spike of anger through the foyer and out the front door. He did not look back. My fingers moved quickly. I did not call my friends. I did not call my mother. I called Ms. Harding. Harding was our corporate counsel, sharp, expensive, and loyal only to the entity of the company itself. Crucially, she was my hire, not Julian's. She answered on the second ring, her voice already alert. Harding. Ms. Harding, it is Eliza Vance, I said. My voice was flat, even. I was impressed by its stability. We have a governance issue. There was a brief, professional silence. Eliza, what kind of issue? Julian has abandoned his post as CEO, and I glanced at the empty bank account screen. I suspect his fiduciary duties. As I spoke the words, the fog of the last few months cleared. The late nights he claimed were networking, the sudden interest in meditation retreats. This was not impulsive. This was planned. Julian had been building an exit ramp for months, but he made one fundamental, catastrophic error. He thought I was just the engineer. He thought I was the quiet brain in the server room who made his pretty presentations possible. He forgot that a person who designs complex systems understands strategy. You cannot build an empire of code without anticipating every possible point of failure. I looked at the shared calendar still pulsing on my second monitor. Julian Vance, keynote speaker. Denver Tech Summit. In 2 days. The summit was critical. Our stock, our investors, our entire fourth quarter projection, all hinged on that presentation. He had not just left me, he had sabotaged the company. He thought it would all collapse without him. He thought I would panic, beg him to return, and he would come back on his own terms. Free. He thought wrong. Everything was about to collapse, but it would not be me, and it would not be my company. I arrived at the Synapse Partners office at 8:30 a.m., just as I always did. I wore a charcoal gray suit with sharp shoulders and my highest heels. Power, I had learned from Julian, was often just a costume. The open plan office went quiet as I walked through. The whispers were immediate. Julian's executive assistant was at her desk, visibly crying. The word was already spreading. Julian was missing. My phone was vibrating itself off the desk. Investors, board members, they were in a panic. Julian was the face. Julian was the salesman. Julian was the vision. I ignored them all. At 9 a.m., I called an emergency meeting of all department heads. They filed into the main conference room, their faces a mix of fear and morbid curiosity. I stood at the head of the table. Good morning, I said, my voice cutting through their chatter. As of this morning, Julian Vance is on an indefinite personal leave of absence for health reasons. He is unreachable. I let that sink in. The health reasons was a kindness, or perhaps a strategic lie. It gave us cover. This brings us to the keynote for the Tech Summit. Obviously, Julian will not be delivering it. Mark, our VP of Sales and Julian's most loyal sycophant, spoke up. Then we have to pull out. Without Julian, we have no presentation. He is the show. No, I said flatly. We are not pulling out. I will be delivering the keynote. Mark actually laughed. Eliza, with all due respect, you are the back end. You do not have the charisma for the main stage. I turned my gaze on him. It was cold. Thank you for your concern, Mark, but charisma cannot patch the critical security flaw I found in our client-side data transfer protocol last night while I was debugging. A flaw. I might add, that has existed for 6 months while your team has been focused on synergy. Mark's mouth snapped shut. The other managers looked down. I will handle the keynote, I continued. The rest of you will handle your departments. We will not look weak. We will not falter. Go back to your teams. They filed out, rattled. I closed the door to my office. I did not cry. I did not scream. I opened a root-level terminal and began a full-scale digital audit. I worked all night, fueled by black coffee and a cold, precise rage. I was a ghost in the machine, running diagnostics, checking access logs, pulling server histories that Julian did not even know existed. He thought he had covered his tracks by turning off his phone. He was an amateur. By midnight, I found it. It was worse than just draining our personal accounts. Julian had been trying to steal from the company. He had created an invoice, a very good fake, for a $1.2 million consulting fee from one of our largest clients. He had been attempting to divert the payment, which was due in 3 days, to a new shell corporation, the name of the LLC SoulSync Holdings. The breadcrumbs were all there. I followed the digital trail, the credit card receipts he had filed under corporate entertainment, the expensive retreats, the payments to a spiritual coach in Sedona, Arizona. Her name was Sky. I looked at her picture on an influencer website, surrounded by crystals and desert light. This was the freedom he needed. My fingers flew. I locked him out of every system, at every level. I rerouted the $1.2 million payment back to its proper account. I fixed the security flaw Mark's team had missed. Then, I made a backup. A full, triple encrypted copy of every email, every invoice, every illegal wire transfer attempt. I named the folder Evidence Phase 2. He was not just a cheating husband, he was a criminal, and he had given me the weapon I needed to destroy him. I did not fly commercial. I used the company jet, the one Julian loved to use for his networking trips to Napa. Chicago was cold, a harsh wind whipping off the lake that matched the reception I expected. I was not meeting Beatrice and Caroline at one of their homes. I was meeting them at the downtown offices of Beatrice's fund. Julian's older sisters were not housewives. They were formidable. Beatrice, the elder, managed a private equity fund with a ruthless reputation. Caroline ran a hedge fund that specialized in tech derivatives. They were the ones who had given us our seed capital, not as a family favor, but as a calculated investment in their brother's vision. They had always treated me with a polite, icy disdain. I was the quiet, ambitious tech girl who was not good enough for their charismatic brother. I was too cold. I walked into the glass-walled conference room. They were already seated, side by side, a united front of expensive wool suits and skeptical expressions. "Eliza," Beatrice said, her voice clipped. "This had better be important. You pulled me out of a client meeting." "Thank you for seeing me," I said, setting my laptop on the polished mahogany table. I did not sit. "I will be brief. I am not here about my marriage. I am here about your investment." That got their attention. Their posture shifted, moving from family-in-law to fund manager. "I am not here to discuss Julian's affair," I said. Caroline raised a perfectly sculpted eyebrow. "Oh, I am here to discuss his embezzlement." I plugged my laptop into the monitor at the head of the table. I did not show them photos of Julian and Skye. I showed them a spreadsheet. "This," I said, pointing with a laser pen, "is the $1.2 million client payment Julian attempted to divert to an offshore shell account 2 days ago. An account opened under the name Soul Sync Holdings LLC. I clicked to the next slide. "And these are the corporate credit card invoices for the last 8 months. Over $90,000 in consulting fees paid to a spiritual coach in Sedona, Arizona, named Skye. These are coded as business development, but they are, in fact, personal expenses for purification retreats and aura cleansing." The room was silent. The sisters stared at the screen, their faces hardening. The disdain for me was gone, replaced by a familiar, cold fury. This was a language they understood. This was not a cheating husband. This was a bad asset. "Julian is self-destructing," I stated, my voice even, "and he is dragging your investment with him. He has abandoned his post, and he is actively stealing from the company. Your company." Beatrice leaned forward, her eyes never leaving the screen. "Where is he?" "Sedona, I believe. With Skye. He is completely offline." Beatrice finally looked at me. Her gaze was analytical, assessing a new threat, or perhaps a new weapon. "What do you want? Eliza or control?" I said, without hesitation. "Total." Caroline scoffed. "Control, you are the CTO. We are the board. We will install an interim CEO while we handle Julian." "You misunderstand," I said. I opened a new file on the drive. It was a scanned PDF, dated 10 years ago. "You think Julian is Synapse Partners. He thinks he is Synapse Partners. You are all mistaken." I brought up the incorporation documents for a parent company. Vance Innovations. 10 years ago, I explained. I was finalizing the Prometheus algorithm, the core of our entire platform. I was worried about liability and protecting the intellectual property. I insisted we create a holding company that would own the IP and license it back to Synapse Partners, which would function as the sales and operations entity. Beatrice was already scrolling through the document on her own tablet. "I remember this. Julian said it was just boilerplate, tax sheltering. He said it was too complicated." I corrected her. "He did not read it. He was busy designing the new logo, but I read it. And Ms. Harding structured it exactly as I requested." I pointed to the signature page. "Julian's lazy script. and mine. Then I pointed to the stock allocation. Vance Innovations owns 100% of the Prometheus code. Synapse Partners is worthless without its license. And I zoomed in on the line item. Own 51% of Vance Innovations. The color drained from Caroline's face. Beatrice just stared at me. Julian was never the owner, I said quietly. He was the face. I am the brain. And I own the brain. He signed it all away a decade ago because he could not be bothered to read the fine print. I let the silence sit for a moment. Julian, I continued, is now a minority shareholder in an operational entity that is in breach of contract with its parent company. And he is a defendant in a criminal case for embezzlement. You can back him, and your investment goes to zero. Or you can back me at the emergency board meeting I am calling for Friday. Beatrice leaned back. The hint of a smile, cold and sharp as a shard of ice, touched her lips. He always was a damned fool. You will vote with me to remove him from the board, I said. It was not a question. We will, Beatrice confirmed. The alliance was sealed, not in blood, but in ink. I stepped out from the wings onto the main stage of the Denver Tech Summit. The ballroom was massive, packed with at least 2,000 people. The spotlight was blindingly hot. As the moderator announced my name, Eliza Vance, Chief Creative Officer of Synapse Partners, I could feel the ripple of disappointment wash over the crowd. It was a palpable thing, a collective sigh. They had come to see the show. They had come to see Julian. Julian was a master on stage. He paced, he charmed, he told stories. He made code sound like poetry and venture capital sound like a spiritual quest. He had a 20-page script loaded onto the teleprompter, full of vague metaphors about synergy and reimagining the human connection. It was all nonsense, but it was beautiful nonsense. I walked to the lectern, my heels clicking precisely on the stage. The teleprompter screen glowed with Julian's opening joke. I looked at it, then at the tech operator in the front row. I tapped the microphone. "Good morning," I said. My voice was clear, amplified, and carried no warmth. "My name is Eliza Vance. I am the architect of the Prometheus engine." I looked at the operator. "Kill the prompter." He looked confused, glancing backstage. "Turn it off," I repeated. The screen went black. Now the murmur in the crowd changed from disappointment to curiosity. I had their attention, for the wrong reasons. "You were expecting my husband, Julian Vance," I said. "He is unable to be here. He is on an unscheduled personal sabbatical to, quote, find freedom. So instead of his presentation, you are going to get mine." I clicked the remote in my hand, and the massive screen behind me lit up. It was not with Julian's beautiful, branded graphics. It was a blank, black terminal screen with a single green cursor blinking. Julian's speech was titled, "The Soul of the Machine." That is a poetic concept, but it is technically inaccurate. Machines do not have souls. They have architecture. I began to type, live, bringing up lines of code. The room was silent. This was not a keynote. This was a masterclass. "For 5 years," I continued, my fingers moving across the portable keyboard at the lectern. "You have been told that Synapse Partners is about human-centric connection. That is the marketing. The reality is that Synapse Partners is a predictive analytics engine, and for the last 18 months, I have been building its next iteration." I hit the Enter key. The code compiled, and the screen split, showing a complex branching nodal map. "You were promised a discussion on the future of AI. Julian's speech would have given you platitudes. I will give you the demo." For the next 20 minutes, I did not tell stories. I presented facts. I showed them, in real time, how the new algorithm could analyze unstructured datasets like the live sentiment of a conference audience and predict market shifts with 98% accuracy. I showed them the raw power of what I had built, the thing Julian had been packaging and selling without ever truly understanding. My style was not flashy. It was not charismatic, but it was true, and it was undeniable. In the front rows, I could see the phones, The tech analysts, the ones who could make or break a company, were not just watching, they were typing. Their faces were awash in the blue light of their screens, their expressions intent. Tweets started to fly. I saw one on a screen in the press row. Julian Vance is a no-show. Turns out his wife, Eliza Vance, is the actual brain. Scrapping the marketing and doing a live demo of the Prometheus 2 engine. Holy shit. Another, forget the face of Synapse. The brain is giving the most brutally honest and impressive tech demo I have seen in 5 years. Miles away, in a sun-scorched resort in Sedona, Julian was seeing them too. He was sitting on a terrace with Sky, sipping a green juice. His freedom was being interrupted by notifications. His face, I would later learn, turned a dark, ugly red. It was not the jealousy of a spurned lover. It was the white-hot rage of a king whose designated servant had just sat on his throne. He grabbed his phone and stormed away from Sky, dialing. He called Mark, a board member who always golfed with him. "Mark, what the hell is this? She is ruining the brand. She has no charisma. She is turning our partners off. You have to stop this." He called another, then another, spitting venom, trying to poison the well, to paint me as unstable, a liability. But as he was dialing, my presentation was ending. I finished the demo, and the screen behind me showed the raw data model. The future is not about synergy, I concluded. It is about data, and we have the data. Thank you. For a second, there was silence. The audience was processing. Then, one analyst in the front row stood up and began to clap. Then another. Within 10 seconds, the entire room was on its feet. The applause was not the polite, warm reception Julian received. It was loud. It was respectful. It was a roar. I walked off stage, my heart hammering, not from fear, but from the adrenaline of a successful deployment. Our stock, which had dipped 5% on the news of Julian's illness, had not just stabilized, it was climbing. I picked up my phone as I entered the green room. One new text message. It was from Beatrice. "Well done. Keep going." I took a sip of water. This was only the beginning. The next 3 months were an exercise in controlled demolition and simultaneous construction. I worked like a machine, not with the manic energy of panic, but with the cool, steady hum of a high-performance server processing a complex task. With Ms. Harding running point and the full iron-willed backing of Beatrice and Caroline, the legal proceedings began. We filed the initial injunction based on the embezzlement attempt. It was a complex, brutal process, designed to legally sever Julian from the company he thought he owned. We moved to freeze his shares, arguing that his actions constituted a material breach of his fiduciary duty, posing an existential threat to the company's stability. The evidence I had gathered, the server logs, the wire transfer requests, the Sky invoices, was irrefutable. While the lawyers built their case, I dismantled my life. I put the Cherry Creek house on the market. Julian had always loved that house, loved telling people what he paid for it, loved its empty, echoing spaces. It was, as he liked to say, aggressively overvalued, which he saw as a sign of his success. It sold in less than a week for an obscene amount of money, a testament to a market bubble Julian adored. I let the new owners have the sterile Italian furniture. I moved into a penthouse in a new, minimalist tower downtown. It was half the size and all glass, overlooking the city grid and the distant mountains. I had no furniture for the first week, just a mattress on the floor, my workstation, and 3 monitors. It was the calmest I had been in a decade. My new life was a blank slate, and I was the architect. I began planning my own freedom. It did not involve a yacht, an ashram, or a younger partner. It involved steel, glass, and rock. I had always dreamed of a specific piece of architecture, a house that was part of the landscape, not an imposition on it. I used the proceeds from the house sale, my half, which was now legally partitioned from Julian's frozen assets, and bought a parcel of land near Telluride. It was a wild, difficult piece of land, clinging to a sheer cliff face. Julian had hated it when I had shown it to him years ago. It is too remote. Eliza, you cannot even get good cell service. What is the point? That was precisely the point. I hired an architect, a woman known for her uncompromising, brutalist-inspired designs that were nonetheless deeply integrated with their environment. I gave her the schematics, a house that was entirely self-sustaining, off-grid, powered by solar and geothermal, a fortress of solitude, built not to keep the world out, but to let the right parts of it in, on my terms. It was a monument to my independence. While I was building, Julian was floundering. I knew this because, despite his digital security being pathetic, he was still predictable. He and Sky, his spiritual guide, were burning through the cash he had managed to drain from our personal accounts, and Sky was not cheap. They were developing an app. I had to give him credit for the sheer, breathtaking audacity of it. It was a mindfulness app called Soul Sync. The irony was so thick I could almost taste it. He was building a business based on authenticity and connection funded by stolen money. He was already pitching it, trying to raise capital. He was promising his new circle of wealthy, spiritually vacant friends in Sedona that he had a massive buyout from Synapse coming his way. He was, I knew, depending on that. He believed he still held the cards. He believed the company needed him. He believed I was just keeping his seat warm. I saw the queries against our server, the failed login attempts using his old credentials. I saw the credit card bills he was racking up on his few remaining personal cards. The man who needed freedom was now a prisoner of his own delusions and his dwindling bank account. I did nothing. I simply watched the data. I forwarded the relevant expenditures to Ms. Harding for the legal file, and I waited for him to run out of road. It was the 4th month. The calls started. Not the tearful, regretful voicemails I had half expected might come in the middle of the night. These were daytime calls, left with my executive assistant, filled with a strange, manufactured urgency. It was Julian, and he was not calling to apologize. He was calling to schedule a meeting. My assistant, a ruthlessly efficient woman I had hired post-departure, forwarded me the messages. Eliza, darling, it is Julian. I have got something massive. We need to talk. Book me for an hour. Sweetheart, big opportunity. He was not asking. He was telling. He was still operating under the delusion that he was the CEO, that I was his CTO, that this 4-month hiatus was a spiritual journey from which he was now ready to return, bearing gifts. He genuinely believed I was just holding the fort. The arrogance was so pure it was almost impressive, like a perfect, flawless diamond of self-deception. He had, as my digital breadcrumbs confirmed, become obsessed with SoulSync. He had poured every last cent of his stolen money into it. He had, according to chatter I picked up from a very disgruntled web developer he had stiffed, promised Sky's circle of wealthy Sedona investors that this was the next big thing. He had promised them a massive 8-figure acquisition, specifically, an acquisition by Synapse Partners. He was not just delusional. He was actively selling a fantasy based on a company he no longer had any claim to. He was desperate. His promises were coming due. I let him leave 3 more messages before I had my assistant reply. Ms. Vance can meet you. Thursday, 10 a.m., at the offices of Harding Legal. That is the only availability. A meeting at our lawyer's office. Even Julian, in his fog of narcissism, should have been able to read that signal. But his desperation was a brighter light. He agreed immediately. He arrived at 10:03, a calculated display of being just important enough to be late. He walked into the sterile, glass-walled conference room at Ms. Harding's firm not as a man facing legal ruin, but as a conquering hero. He was deeply tanned, his hair artfully messy. He wore a cream-colored linen suit over an expensive, collarless shirt. He looked rested, vibrant, and utterly toxic. He was radiating that dangerous, high-wattage charm that had built the company's public face. He even air-kissed Ms. Harding, who looked at him as though he were a biological contaminant. Eliza. He smiled, his voice warm, as if we were meeting for brunch. You look efficient. And Ms. Harding, always a pleasure. He sat at the head of the table, a spot neither I nor Ms. Harding had taken. He opened a sleek, brand-new laptop. All right, he said. All business. I know you have been managing things beautifully, Eliza, truly. But I have found it. The next vertical. The future. He began his pitch. He brought up a presentation deck for SoulSync. It was all soft focus images of deserts, sunsets, and beautiful people meditating. The graphics were slick. I recognized the work of the high-end design firm we used to use, which meant he had paid them a fortune. He spoke for 15 minutes, using all his old buzzwords. Synergy, authenticity, human-centric. He was pitching a mindfulness app that used biorhythmic feedback to align your energy. It was, in short, utter nonsense. He was pitching this to me, the woman who wrote code, and to Ms. Harding, the woman who wrote contracts. He finished, his arms spread wide, a messianic smile on his face. This is the future, Eliza. This is what Synapse is missing, the soul I always talked about. And what? Ms. Harding asked, her voice dangerously quiet. Is your proposal? Julian? Julian's smile became conspiratorial. It is a win-win. We bring SoulSync under the Synapse umbrella, a full acquisition. It gives us the wellness vertical, and it brings me back into the fold, where I belong. We can structure the deal however you want, but I am thinking $10 million. It is a bargain for the future of the company. Ms. Harding did not laugh, but a small, sharp muscle in her jaw twitched. It was the closest I had ever seen her come to losing her composure. I just stared at him. The silence in the room stretched. The hum of the air conditioning was the only sound. Julian's smile faltered, just a fraction. I leaned forward. My voice was low, and I made sure it was completely devoid of any emotion. Julian, I said, Synapse Partners does not acquire ideas, especially not bad ones. His face tightened. Eliza, this is not an idea. This is a fully formed— And you, I cut him off, the ice in my voice sharp enough to cut glass, are no longer in a position to suggest anything. At all. Julian let out a short, sharp laugh. It was a practiced sound, the one he used to dismiss an employee's bad idea in a board meeting. Eliza, do not be naive. I know you are angry. I get it. I do. But this is my company. My name is on the door. I built it. He was still smiling that radiant, confident smile, but his eyes had gone hard. He was shifting from charm to intimidation. I did not reply. I simply turned my head, just a few degrees, and gave Ms. Harding a single, slight nod. Ms. Harding, who had been waiting with the patience of a predator, reached for a thick, leather-bound portfolio on the credenza behind her. She placed it on the table and slid it across the polished wood. It stopped perfectly in front of Julian. Mr. Vance, she said, her voice dropping into a formal, legal monotone that was far more terrifying than any shout. This is a courtesy copy of the injunction filed this morning. It is a temporary restraining order, freezing all your assets related to your shares in Synapse Partners, pending the outcome of the embezzlement hearing. Julian's smile vanished. What, that is absurd. Section 2. Ms. Harding continued, as if he had not spoken, is the full evidence packet for that hearing. It includes the server logs, wire transfer requests, and a sworn affidavit from the bank, detailing your attempt to divert $1.2 million of client funds into the SoulSync Shell Corporation. Julian's face, which had been a healthy, expensive tan, began to pale under the linen shirt. That was a misunderstanding, a clerical error. Section 3, Ms. Harding said, relentless, is perhaps more immediately relevant. These are the minutes from the emergency board meeting held 2 days ago, per the company bylaws. She slid a single separate sheet of paper from the portfolio. The motion was to suspend you from all executive duties, effective immediately, for cause. The motion passed unanimously. You are no longer an employee, officer, or representative of Synapse Partners. Julian stared at the paper. He was not reading the text. He was staring at the signatures at the bottom. His voice was a strained whisper. "My sisters. They do not like being stolen from," I said quietly, speaking for the first time since he had laughed. "They are investors, Julian, not your allowance." He looked up at me, his eyes wide, finally, with true panic. The charm was gone. The intimidation was gone. All that was left was the raw, spoiled child. "Eliza, you cannot do this. I will fight this. I will. I am the founder." "Ah," I said. I reached into my own briefcase. I pulled out one more file. This one was thinner. "That is the last item on the agenda. Vance Innovations." I slid the document over to him. It was old, dated 2015. "Do you remember this, Julian?" I asked. This was 10 years ago. I had just finished the Prometheus architecture. I told you I needed to protect the intellectual property, to put it in a separate holding company to shield it from operational liability. You said it was too complicated and that you were busy negotiating the lease on the new office. He was staring at the signature page, his own lazy, arrogant signature. "It establishes Vance Innovations as the sole owner of the Prometheus source code," I explained, my voice as calm as if I were describing a software update. "Synapse Partners, the company you think you own, is just a licensed operator, a sales entity, and Vance Innovations," I tapped the stock allocation table, "is owned 51% by me." I leaned in, lowering my voice so he had to strain to hear me. "That code is the entire company. Julian, it is everything, and you gave it to me. You traded the keys to the kingdom for a better-sounding title on your business card. You wanted to be the founder." I stood up, gathering my things. "The problem is, you were never the partner. You were just the first salesman, and you have just been fired." He looked flattened, as if the structural integrity of his entire being had failed. The linen suit, which had seemed so effortlessly expensive moments before, now hung on him, a costume for a part he had forgotten how to play. He gripped the edge of the conference table, his knuckles white. "Eliza, please," he stammered, and the sound was appalling. The radiant, booming charm was gone, replaced by a thin, desperate whine. "You cannot. You just cannot do this. SoulSync, that app is everything. It is all I have left. I have investors. Eliza, I promised them." I looked at him, and I am sure my expression was utterly blank. I felt nothing, not pity, not rage, not even a grim sense of satisfaction. I felt only the quiet hum of a process reaching its logical conclusion. "You have freedom, Julian," I said. "That is what the note said. This is what you wanted. You are free from the burden of the company. You are free from me. You are free to pursue Sky." The mention of her name made him flinch, as if I had struck him. He pushed back from the table, trying to find his anger again. It was the only fuel he had left. "I will sue you," he spat, his voice cracking. "I will drag you through the courts for 10 years. I will tell everyone. I will tell the press. I will tell every investor what you did, how you waited until I was vulnerable and then you stole my company. You think you are cold. I will show you what a public war looks like." He was breathing heavily, his face a mottled, ugly red. He looked at Ms. Harding, then back at me, searching for a reaction. Ms. Harding sighed. It was not a sound of distress, but of profound, maternal impatience, as if a child had spilled milk on her clean floor. "And we," she said, tapping the thick, leather-bound binder in front of him, We'll respond to every media request with the complete evidence file for your embezzlement charges. We will provide them with the bank statements, the wire transfer requests, and, of course, the invoices for the $90,000 you spent on Ms. Sky. I wonder which headline will run first. Ambitious wife takes over, or disgraced CEO steals client funds for desert love tryst. Go ahead, Mr. Vance. Test the public. Julian collapsed back into his chair. The fight went out of him completely, leaving a vacuum. He had nothing. The gun was loaded, the barrel was cold, and it was pressed firmly against his temple. This was the moment. The criminal trial would be a distraction. It would be messy, public, and drain company resources, even if we won. I wanted a clean extraction. I wanted efficiency. I did not want to think about him ever again. I am going to make you an offer, I said into the silence. He looked up, his eyes dull and confused. This is not for you, I continued, my voice low and precise. It is for the company. A criminal trial is noisy. I do not like noise. It is inefficient. I slid a final one-page document across the table. It was a share purchase agreement. I will instruct Ms. Harding not to file the criminal complaint. We will seal the embezzlement file. In exchange, you will sell your remaining shares back to the company. Your entire stake. He stared at the paper. I could see the flicker of calculation returning to his eyes, a tiny, greedy ember in the wreckage. The panic was receding, replaced by the familiar glint of the opportunist. He thought this was it. He thought he had lost the battle but was being offered a golden parachute. He thought, even now, he could still win something. How much? He asked, his voice a dry rasp. He was trying to sound casual, like a negotiator. My stake. It is 8%. Given the keynote, the stock is up. That 8%. It is worth a fortune. It is, I agreed. A very specific fortune. I let him wait, the silence stretching. We are offering you a one-time payment, I said. $350,000. His jaw dropped. 300. That is insulting. That is nothing. My stake is worth $20 million. At least. Your stake is worth what the majority shareholder says it is worth when you are facing a federal indictment. Ms. Harding interjected, not looking up from her notepad. It is a very fair number. Julian, I said calmly. It is, in fact, almost exactly the valuation of your stake 10 years ago when you signed the Vance Innovations Agreement. Before I built Prometheus 2, I consider it a generous offer. It is just enough, I added, glancing at a note on my own pad, to pay back the credit card debts you have accumulated in Sedona and settle your accounts with your SoulSync developer. You will walk away clean, a free man. He looked from my face to Ms. Harding's. He saw no mercy, no negotiation, just the cold, hard lines of the trap. It was this, or it was prison. It was walking away with his debts cleared, or it was going to jail and losing absolutely everything. He reached for the pen. Ms. Harding held out for him. His hand was shaking, not with rage this time, but with the weak, pathetic tremor of a profound and total defeat. He signed the paper. Ms. Harding immediately took the agreement, reviewed the signature, and closed the file. The funds will be wired to your remaining account within the hour. Mr. Vance, she said, standing up. A car is waiting for you downstairs. Do not return to the Synapse building. You are now officially trespassing. He stood up. The expensive linen suit was rumpled beyond repair. The tan just looked like a stain. He looked at me, one last time, searching for what regret a flicker of the woman he had married. There was nothing. Just me. He turned and walked out of the room. Not a founder, not a CEO, not a husband, just a man who had been bought out for the precise price of his debts. It was exactly 6 months to the day since the yellow sticky note. I was standing in my study in Telluride, a room cantilevered over a sheer drop, enclosed on 3 sides by floor-to-ceiling glass. The house was finished. It was not a home. It was a statement, a masterpiece of steel, glass, and rock, powered entirely by its own geothermal wells and a solar array hidden on the upper mesa. It was silent, save for the wind. The air was thin and clean. Down in Denver, the company, which I had officially rebranded as Synapse AI, was not just stable, it was explosive. My keynote had reset our narrative. We were no longer a lifestyle tech brand. We were a hardcore artificial intelligence firm. I had spent the last 2 months poaching the best minds in the field. I had also hired a new chief executive officer, a brilliant woman named Sarah Jenkins, poached from a competitor after a ruthless month-long negotiation. She was a systems operator, a true leader. She ran the day-to-day, leaving me free to do what I had always done best, build the future. I was the architect, in all things. While I was looking at the San Juan Mountains, Julian was looking at the cracked stucco ceiling of a one-room rental apartment in Sedona. The desert heat was oppressive, and the window air conditioning unit rattled, blowing lukewarm air. He was alone. Sky, the spiritual catalyst for his freedom, had departed. His SoulSync application had been a technical and financial catastrophe. The user interface was buggy, the concept was derivative, and the server costs alone had eaten through his meager $350,000 payout in less than 90 days. Sky, who had believed he was a multimillionaire tech visionary, did not appreciate his sudden fall into the negative energy of poverty. She had, as he later found out, simply moved on to a more solvent guru. The money was gone. The pittance I had given him, just enough to clear his debts, had been vaporized. The investors he had promised a $10 million buyout were now calling lawyers. Not him. He was broke. He was a fraud, and he was out of options. He sold his expensive watch for gas and enough to secure a cheap rental car. He got in, pointed the car east, and drove. He drove for 10 hours across the barren landscapes of Arizona and New Mexico, back to Colorado. He did not drive to the Cherry Creek house. He knew I had sold it. He did not drive to our old office. He drove to the new Synapse AI headquarters, a gleaming 20-story tower of glass and steel I had leased 3 months ago. He walked into the lobby. It was not the familiar warm wood and leather space he had designed. It was a vast atrium of white marble and digital displays, with a 30-foot data visualization wall pulsing with live analytics. He looked, I was told later, like a ghost. He had lost weight, the wrong kind of weight. His expensive linen suit, the one he had worn to the lawyer's office, was now a wrinkled, stained mess. His tan was gone, replaced by the gray pallor of exhaustion and cheap food. He approached the main security desk, run by a woman who did not know him. "Can I help you, sir?" He tried to summon the old charm, but his voice was a dry croak. "I am here to see Eliza Vance. Just tell her it is Julian." The receptionist looked at his disheveled state, then at her screen. "Is she expecting you, Mr. Julian Vance? Just tell her. She will see me." My assistant, a new one, a sharp woman named Anya, buzzed my private line. I was in the main boardroom on the 20th floor, wrapping up the quarterly shareholder meeting. It had been a triumph. Sarah Jenkins was at my side. Beatrice and Caroline were on the video link, smiling. "Excuse me, Ms. Vance." Anya's voice was quiet in my earpiece. "I apologize for the interruption. There is a man in the lobby. A Julian Vance. He is insisting on seeing you. He does not have an appointment." The room did not spin. My heart did not stop. I simply felt the click of the final gear locking into place. The system was complete. I looked at Sarah, who looked at me with a question in her eyes. "Give me 5 minutes. Sarah, wrap up the call with the board." I pressed the button for my earpiece. "Anya," I said, my voice perfectly calm. "Please have security escort Mr. Vance to the main boardroom on this floor, seat him at the far end of the table, and bring him a water. He looks I imagine. Dehydrated. I took a single deep, cleansing breath. We will handle this right now. The boardroom doors, two massive panels of silent, smoked glass, slid open. A security guard I did not recognize escorted Julian inside and then remained posted outside. The room was at least 4 times the size of our old one, a glass box on the 20th floor overlooking the city and the mountains beyond. I was seated at the head of a 30-foot black granite table. Beside me sat Sarah Jenkins, our new CEO, and Ms. Harding. On the massive 80-inch display wall that usually showed our global data flow, the live video feeds of Beatrice and Caroline watched impassively. Julian stopped just inside the door. He was diminished. He looked like a man who had been hollowed out, the expensive suit hanging on him like a costume he had slept in. He stared at me, at Sarah, at Ms. Harding, and then at his sisters on the screen. He was completely, finally, outnumbered. He tried. I saw the muscles in his face work, attempting to assemble the old, easy charm. "Eliza," he said, his voice a dry rasp. You look incredible. Truly. The new office. This is impressive." I did not stand up. I did not smile. I did not acknowledge him in any way except to speak. "What do you want, Julian?" The question, so devoid of emotion, so transactional, clearly rattled him. He had been expecting a confrontation, tears, perhaps a private meeting. He was getting a public audit. He clasped his hands in front of him, a nervous gesture I had never seen him use. He started, then stopped. He began again, launching into the speech he must have rehearsed on the 10-hour drive. "I was wrong, Eliza. I was so wrong. I got lost. I did not know what I was doing. That freedom nonsense. I was sick. I see that now. I have learned so much about what is real, about authenticity." He looked at me, pleading. Sky was a mistake, a terrible mistake. He took a step closer to the table, but did not sit. "Ely," he said, using my old nickname. It sounded like gravel in his mouth. "You know what we had. You know we were the perfect team. I was the face. You were the brain. Synapse AI. It still needs that. It needs me." He was desperate now, the pitch becoming frantic. "Let me come back, please. I will do anything. A consultant. Business development. I can talk to clients. I can be the face again. I can help you. You need me for that." The silence in the room was absolute. Sarah Jenkins looked at a report on her tablet, waiting for my cue. Ms. Harding studied Julian as if he were a deposition witness. On the screen, Beatrice examined her cuticles. I looked at him. I did not see the man who had abandoned me. I did not see my husband of 20 years. I saw an applicant, a desperate, unqualified candidate making a cold pitch for a job he was not suited for. I picked up the small remote on the granite table. I pointed it at the wall. I clicked a button. The video feeds of his sisters minimized, replaced by a dashboard, a single brutal line graph. "This," I said, my voice clear and amplified by the room's acoustics, "is the revenue for the 6 months before you left." I used the remote's laser pointer to trace the line. It was almost perfectly, stagnantly, flat. This was you, Julian. This was your face. This was your charm. You, holding us in place. His eyes were glued to the screen. He did not understand. And this. I clicked the button again. A second line appeared. It was not a gentle curve. It was a vertical spike, a 90-degree ascent. "This is the revenue for the 6 months after you left, after I took over, after I stopped paying for your consulting trips and your steak dinners and started investing in the code." He stared at it. The data was undeniable. He had not been the engine. He had been the emergency brake. "The problem is, Julian," I said, and now I stood up. placing my hands on the table. My voice was not loud, but it cut through the room. It turns out the face was not necessary. It was not an asset. It was a liability. It was a massive, 7-figure drain on resources that was actively holding us back. I paused, letting the Vietnamese word hang in the air for a moment. Holding us back. I looked directly at him, the man who was now a stranger. The company is healthier, faster, and more profitable without you. I walked around the table until I was standing just a few feet from him. Your freedom was the single greatest gift you ever gave me. You set me free. You set this company free. So, thank you. I gestured to the glass doors, where the security guard was now waiting. Now, please leave my building. Thank you so much for listening to this story. I am so curious where you are all listening from, so please drop a comment below and let me know, and share your thoughts on the story. I invite you to subscribe to the Lily Revenge Stories channel, like this video, and if you want to support us, please hit that hype button so this story can be heard by even more people.